Parker.
And my name is Ned.
And this is The Force Unlimited, yet another Star Wars Unlimited podcast. This is episode number 13. We're recording on April 14th. Tonight might be a slightly shorter episode.
We'll see.
Because while Ned is a man who believes in math and science, I believe in woo-woo. So in the interest of keeping the 13th episode risk adverse, we're going to go fast and quickly. I hope you've got your taxes done.
Yes.
One format change, dear listener. Going forward, Ned and I will be releasing on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, which will cost you 2 episodes a year. So I'm sorry. That's 2 fewer episodes a year of Ned and his math, but it does increase the predictability of when if we have an episode on a Tuesday. So if you're a listener, you can look at a calendar and know if we're releasing an episode. If you're a garbage roller, you can know whether or not you should release an interview with the developer within an hour of when we release an interview with a developer. Ned, since the last time we recorded, there have been we started getting Shadows of the Galaxy spoilers. That's exciting.
I know. It is.
Let's talk about them.
Yeah. Pumped. But wait, hold on. One moment. One moment.
Okay.
You told me, and my understanding was when we were going into this, that we're the McLaren Neil News Hour. That means that we don't talk about spoilers. That's for folks who are not on the news that's fit to print side of things.
That's a dumb policy, Ned. I don't like that policy.
Well, I'm aware of that, but that was your policy that you outlined, I think, to me a couple of episodes ago.
I hate it, but yeah, that's true. We don't generally talk about spoilers on this episode, but there were spoilers for Shadows of the Galaxy. Which is exciting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, another thing that was exciting. This is kind of crazy to me, coming from an LCG background, but I was with my son at Powell's Books, the one in Cedar Hills.
Okay, I was going to ask that.
I had talked. I'd been at Red Castle doing my Sealed Escalation League, and the employee there, Matt, seems like an awesome guy running the thing, doing a great job running it. Mentioned that he needs a couple extra packs in case people drop out to be able to onboard new people, because they don't just need the weekly packs, which he had set aside, but if somebody new joins, they need enough packs to catch up, and he didn't have that. And he had heard that Powell's, the main Burnside branch, was selling packs at MSRP, so he just sent somebody down there to pick them up. Which, I mean, that's amazing customer service, because he's paying, he's paying MSRP, which is, when you're in retail, bad. Just to support those of us who are already playing. But so I was in the Cedar Hills branch, which for those of you who know Portland know that that's the more sci-fi. It's the second biggest of the Powells, and which it's the size of a Barnes and Noble. It's a normal bookstore size. Yes. But I was like, I wonder if they have any packs. And lo and behold, they did. And I, went up and I was like, hey, how much are those? I was expecting a number like $7, $8, $9. And she's like, well, they're $4.99. I was like, what? And so I got some. And fun fact, Ned, as you noted during our Mr. Suitcase episode, the EV, the expected value of a pack, is generally negative. In a world where market forces are able to interact. As the EV of a pack goes up, then the price of a pack goes
up. Generally speaking,
Generally speaking, right? If people will pay more if there's a lot of value. If there's an infinite amount of packs, then the price will, the EV will come down.
Drop. Right.
But
because
in a world where packs are going on eBay right now for like $8, $9 a piece, if when you can get them at MSRP, the actual value of the pack is much higher just by virtue of the fact that, maybe that math is wrong, but I feel like it's right.
Arbitrage
right?
there. Yeah,
exactly, right? Like, so I opened
a
a surplus Luke, which basically paid for the entire endeavor, and I've arranged to exchange that for cold hard cash. But the big note that I was excited about almost made me run Casino Han tonight, but not quite, in our match, is I finally have got Millennium Falcon, which I don't care about the Millennium Falcon, fine card, whatever. I hate upkeep, so I will probably never enjoy playing it ever. But that is the last holdout. So while I don't have a playset, I now have at least one of every Spark of Rebellion card, and that was felt momentous to me.
Beautiful.
But I did not play Casino Han tonight. Ned, why don't you tell us about the match that we played and the cards that I did play?
It was an interesting match. So I was playing Jin Red, a homebrew against Parker's semi-homebrew Krennic Green. And
I respect the Jin presence.
yeah, well, there were a couple of cards that interested me. Like there's a lot of weird synergy, like side synergies that interested me between Sneak Attack, Wing Leader, K2SO, and Heroic Sacrifice. So I thought, hey, let's try and get a stew going. And a stew was made, but it was not piping hot. I took one game off of you, which I am proud of, but honestly, just like the top, I was not fast enough to get under you, and your top end is just so much more powerful than mine that there was no way for me to squeak things out.
The blue-green villainous ticking clock
yeah.
is a loud ticking clock. Do you think you got enough value out of Jin's ability to justify running that deck with Jin?
So I think that's an interesting question. There were definitely a bunch of moments where I was able to trade up in a way that felt really good, where I was able to, for example, trade throw a Sabine into a Shore Trooper and keep my Sabine. I was able to,
that one you would have happened
Yeah.
or not happened
Sure,
either way,
sure.
but into the cell block guard.
Right,
Yeah.
cell block guard. Yeah,
I'm just curious.
There were
There's
Yeah,
there's kind of an understanding that any Thrawn deck right now in Spark of Rebellion is probably just a better deck if you run Boba in it.
yeah.
That you just swap out the leaders, leave the 50 cards intact. And I was kind of during our game wondering, trying to keep track in my head of how often you were getting value out of that trade. You definitely got some good trades at the low end, but I'm wondering if the burst value of just being able to get Millennium Falcon out on turn one, or something like that.
Maybe
being able to get
this is where we kind of get into the weeds. Is that I feel like unlike Boba and Thrawn, Boba is like you can build your deck around Thrawn, but Thrawn is kind of like an incidental value, and Boba feels a very similar way, where generally you're not building your deck around maximizing the value that you're getting from Boba. You just like
from the leader, you're just built.
Yeah. You're just realizing value from Boba passively. And in comparison, Jin is more of like a passive value leader where you're using her to try and nickel and dime out little extra advantages, whereas Han is a leader that has like a very build around feel to him. And so I would not run this deck with Han because I would be running something different. I would be running something like Casino Han. I think is demonstrated to work very, pretty darn well.
Although I haven't looked at the deck list, but apparently Blue Han did well this weekend at some 1Ks, which I'm very curious about that deck list. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to look at them. Any takeaways from the match?
So bombing run is good.
Yes.
If we look at the times when I was able to bombing run for reasonable value, I felt like I was getting about comparable value to your overwhelming barrages, which is good because they're both 5 resource cards that are multi-target removal. That said, I felt like I had to structure my plays a little bit more strangely in order to realize that value from bombing run. But
in a sense, so is expected because bombing run's a 1-aspect card and overwhelming barrage is a 2-aspect card. You would expect it to be slightly better. This drum I will beat. I know you don't necessarily agree with that. Which is funny though, because OB is kind of generally perceived to be pushed.
I would totally agree that OB is pushed. I think that OB is a very, very good card, and I'm happy to have longer discussions about OB. But I think that this comparison between bombing run and overwhelming barrage.
I want to do my takeaway, and because I think it's really value for about half of our listeners. The half of our listeners who are here for me as opposed to here for you, and that is playing a less good deck that is better for you yields better results, and I'm increasingly convinced. I have been trying to make Iden Green work, and I have been failing. I have been just whiffing in the Space Arena and Ground Arena webcam league. I just have not been having success with Iden Green, and I'm increasingly convinced. I like blue. I like green. I am coming around to that. I like villain, although I think that's more a Spark of Rebellion thing than a Star Wars Unlimited as a whole thing. I like that deck, but the playstyle of Iden feels a little more planning, control-y, intelligent, even though there's a probably 30-plus card overlap, 40-plus card overlap with Krennic. Krennic's playstyle and the few cards that it has, like the Scout Pike Trooper, feel a little more mid-rangey, more just like big, beefy trades, which is more my playstyle. And I've been having more success with green Chewie, green Krennic than I did with green Iden. Even though I recognize that generally I feel like conventionally accepted that Iden's a better leader right now. But playing to my playstyle, playing to my strengths has yielded far better results. And that tonight just really kind of, I felt, even when I was on the back foot and losing, not to take away your win or anything, but that was definitely like that game I was just drawing like all of my super laser technicians. I drew like 3 super laser technicians and 2 resupplies in the space of like 3 turns. I was just like getting nothing to solve my, decreasing hit points. I didn't feel like I didn't know what to do, or I was lost, or the deck was failing me. And so that's my takeaway. I really enjoyed that. But yes, tonight's first of 2 main us topics, Ned. So I put this one on the topic. I wanted to talk about, because one thing you and I enjoy is pedantically defining things.
Man, it's just, I mean, between a person who has practiced law at one point in their life and somebody who is heavily involved in mathematics, pedantic technical definitions are extremely important.
I mean, if you don't have those, what do you have? You have a bunch of...
It's just chaos.
Vague hand-waving. Yeah, exactly. It's chaos. It's one of those areas where your and my mentalities... And this has nothing to do with Force Unlimited. This is just you and me and our insufferable lives. So I want to put this on because not to spoil the ending, but I feel that there is an infinite amount of just recursive pedantry available in this topic, which is the distinction between better and strictly better.
Yes.
And especially with now we have set 1, it's complete. You can talk about cards. We're going to get into set 2 at some point, and people are going to start comparing cards from set 2 to set 1, and we're going to be able to say, well, this card is better generally, but then they're strictly better, and that term gets bandied about. And normally, Ned, in the interest of like the Socratic dialogue, you make me start off with the definitions, but why don't you start off with the definition of better versus strictly better for 2 cards?
I am going to reference game theory here, and I'm going to say a strictly better card is a Pareto improvement over a non-strictly better card. So what that means is that in every aspect, this card is at the level of or superior to the card that it is strictly better than.
Okay. So it's better all the time.
It by the extremely technical definition of strictly better, it must in no case be worse, because otherwise
I assume it has to be better in at least one.
Yes, it must be better in at least one element,
one metric
of one metric, and it cannot be worse in any metrics. And that thing is strictly better. Now, when we're applying things to card games, I think that
I suspect I know where you're headed, and I don't want to go there yet. So whereas better would just be, if you have to choose one of 2, you're generally going to choose one versus the other, and that's a better card. So I wanted to start by talking about Echo Base Defender versus Cell Block Guard. And for our audio dear listeners, the Cell Block Guard is the villainous 3/3 and 3 with Sentinel, and the Echo Base Defender is command and heroism, but it's got that extra point of power. It is a 4/3 for 3,
Yes.
also with Sentinel. So on its face, I think it's a fair assertion that Echo Base Defender is better than Cell Block Guard. They do the same thing.
Yes.
They cost the same amount, and yet Echo Base Defender has an additional point of power, which makes it better.
Yes. Yes, I would agree. If you are looking from the, like, again, if you think about that game topography, right? Decks, if you can include Echo Base Defender in your deck, versus if you could include Cell Block Guard in your deck, if for some reason you were playing decks that could include both of those, you would pick Echo Base Defender over Cell Block Guard in the vast majority of circumstances.
And so I guess that's the question. So first of all, let's just clear that out. That this assumes that cards are available.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We're assuming that nobody is considering this with the aspect tax, right?
Right.
So Echo Base Defender versus Cell Block Guard is a hypothetical example because right now there are no decks that can run those both without
aspect.
Aspect tax. But when you can run one, which one would you rather run? And Echo Base Defender is just a point of power better. But to that end, if I guess there's the first question is so aspects are ruled out, but to what extent do we care about traits, right?
Traits
even if
matter. Yeah.
I mean, so even if a Tarkin deck could run Echo Base Defender, right, for some reason, it doesn't have the Imperial trait,
right?
So then it fails to be. Do I understand that it fails to be strictly better?
Right. So this is where we get into the layers of how better do we have to talk about for strictly better. So you can, if you want to use a very well situated definition of strictly better, one that conforms to most people's normal understanding of the term strictly better, what you are doing is you are taking as a basis some set of a deck, right? So you wouldn't be talking about a vacuum because the vacuum you get all of these situations, but you talk about a deck and you might talk about a meta. So you might say, for example, in my deck that I am playing, Sabine is strictly better than Lothal Insurgent.
Okay.
Right. And that's not going to be actually true, right? You would say Sabine is better than Lothal Insurgent, but they differ in a number of key ways. But going back to...
So this, I mean, hey, dear listener, it's Editor Parker. You can tell because my shirt's a little more unzipped. This episode is what we in the editing booth refer to as a train wreck. So score 1 for woo-woo. I struggle with the idea that there's a subjective definition. Like, I get that, you know, Vader cares about villainy, Tarkin cares about Imperials, but I've built my deck. I've got 47 out of 50 cards, and I'm trying to pick the last 3 of. And, okay, well, now I'm subjective on the level of, well, what are the other 47 cards in my deck when I'm trying to define what is better, but, you know, versus strictly better. But then once you get into, okay, well, there's a meta, right? There's a format. What sets are available? There's the meta. And then there's my local meta that I know. And then all the way down to I'm probably going to be playing Sally, and Sally always runs this deck, right? Like, it's I struggle with the idea of comparing 2 cards in a white room on one end of a spectrum, and then all the way down the other end of the spectrum is considering everything, right? Like, it feels...
And this is where it gets hard, right? Like, when you are talking about things that are strictly better, if you are considering like a pure white room situation, then there is no possible card that is strictly better than any other possible card.
Okay,
you
good.
Could say some cards are better. Yeah.
So that gets to, well, first of all, before we get to that, Ned,
Yes.
it's a trap.
Oh no!
In the parlance
It's a
of
trap.
parlance of Star Wars, because
Yeah.
I'm going to force you to talk about spoilers. So with
Yes.
Shadows of the Galaxy, we got a spoiler for Phase 3 Dark Trooper. And I picked this
Yes.
subject in large part to get around our policy of not discussing spoilers. Because, I mean, so for those of you who aren't following along with spoilers, we'll throw it up on the screen. This one, because it is a spoiler, which we generally avoid talking about, is not that we don't talk about cards that haven't been released yet. We just don't break them down. It is a 3-cost 3/3 in Command Villainy. The Phase 3 Dark Trooper is an Imperial and Trooper, just like Cellblock Guard. It's also a droid. It has Sentinel. And it has a trigger when combat damage is dealt to this unit. Give an experience token to this unit if it survives the damage. So, on its face, this immediately jumped out. Echo-based Defender and Cellblock Guard are not easily comparable because currently no deck can run them both at cost. But a Phase 3 Dark Trooper in a deck that needs one 3-cost Sentinel unit and is running Command, which is a non-trivial but also omnipresent question. This feels a lot closer to strictly better.
I would tend to agree. I would say that the number of circumstances in which you could say that I would rather run Cell Block Guard over Phase 3 Dark Trooper is not large.
Right. So, yeah, and I guess that's the question. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this is that given a long enough tale of Magic Christmasland situations and weird hypotheticals, essentially boiling down into the puzzles that the Outmaneuver are putting out, there are these corner cases where something will always be worse than something else, right? The one that came to mind is, at first I was trying to limit it to hypotheticals. What if as a general rule, we agree more power is better than less power. More HP is generally better than less HP.
Right. But to the more power, right? Like if I'm running Grand Inquisitor, that's actually not true, right? Like if I have a unit of 3 power versus a unit of 4 power, I would rather have the 3 power unit. Assuming I'd rather have a 3 power raid 1 unit over a 4 power unit because my ability doesn't work with 4 power units.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Absolutely. I was just thinking something even more hypothetical, like just defeat a unit with 6 or more power, right? Like, well, that's a knock against higher powered units. But yeah, exactly. Grand Inquisitor. Right. And another spoiler is calculated lethality. This is also from Shadows. It's a 4-cost event. The key point, we're not doing a full breakdown, is defeat a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. And then for each upgrade that was on that unit, give an experience token to a friendly unit. So that card is more penalizing, against a Dark Trooper than a Cell Block Guard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so if that card is prevalent in the meta, suddenly maybe you want to run Cell Block Guard. So I guess when you take into account the entirety of the meta, even down to traits, it gets very difficult to truly say categorically something is strictly better.
Right. And this is why you get into these really pointless semantic arguments, and this is to give a real stupid example, right? Like let's imagine that there was an open fire but deals 1 less damage card, right? It costs exactly the same as open fire, exactly the same aspects as open fire, but it dealt 1 less damage. I could certainly construct some theoretical considerations in which I would rather, I would wish that the card in my hand was not open slightly less fire than open fire. Right?
Eclipse fire. Yeah. And I guess that's so I guess from a purpose of reasonable conversation, there's essentially now we have 3 definitions. We have better, which is pretty subjective, but we can kind of generally agree that people like better cards. On the other end, you have the almost impossible platonic ideal of strictly better.
Right.
But then in the middle, we have the reasonable person definition of strictly better, which is if we
Right.
assume that better is good,
Yes.
then strictly better, right? Like,
Yeah.
but and then even then, I mean, I feel like you probably do have to take into account. I was thinking in my example that like I can imagine set three, Twilight of the Republic, the Clone Wars
Yeah.
focused set, will have some amount of droid hate. Also, probably some
Oh
droid
yeah.
support. But there's got to be,
Hmm.
you can imagine a card that just, when played, defeat a droid, right? And
Right.
so then you're still taking that into account with those Dark Troopers, right? Is it better, is it strictly better? Well, if that card's running rampant, no, it's actually much worse, right? But
Right.
as a general rule, right now, given the 252 Spark of Rebellion, 10 Shadows of the Galaxy cards we've seen, we can say that for a reasonable person definition, Phase 3 Dark
Hmm.
Trooper is strictly better for cell block card in
Right.
decks that can run them.
And right. And so what we need is we need a term that would be like strictly prime better, which means not actually strictly better in the sense of a Pareto improvement, or perhaps we ought to change this and we talk about like the platonic improvement is a Pareto
Right.
improvement. Like this
Okay.
card is Pareto better than this other card because in every relevant aspect it is better and it is no worse in any situation. Versus
I mean,
strictly better, yeah, but that's nobody's
I
going to do
think
that.
getting normal people to use
Yeah.
Pareto, and that is, one of the reasons I like hanging out with you, Ned. That is a
Right.
word that's very much in my passive vocabulary, not in my active vocabulary. And I don't think we're going to get the TCG discourse at large to use that. I think there's something you say for just accepting that like there's this platonic ideal of strictly better that will never be met,
Hmm.
and asking conversations to meet in the middle and say like, are you a reasonable person? Which if you're on
Right.
Discord or Reddit, no. But if you're
Of
at your
course not.
if you're at your LGS, then yes, and right. And if you're on Discord or Reddit, then you are chasing that platonic ideal of strictly better. And if you are at your LGS, if you are just engaging, the with normal people with normal concerns, and you're going to use the reasonable
Yeah.
person. Let's assume that better cards are more desirable, and
Hmm.
now this card is strictly better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say that another way that you could think of it is this idea. I mean, to go back to where this problem of Pareto improvements was first heavily discussed, it's in like trade. People talking about trade and Ricardo, the economist, talking about the ideas of trade is you can come up with situations in which it is not, and this is maybe digressing a little bit too much, but the general argument that is made for trade is if I can do thing X better and you can do thing Y better, then it is, and we can exchange. Then even though it might not be a true Pareto improvement, we can generate more total overall value before yada yada yada. And I guess I'm going way off into the
No,
deep
you
here,
absolutely are, but that's
yeah,
okay. That's why
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
this is episode 13. People who've shown up
yeah,
know this about us. So okay, so
yeah.
but the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because I think we're about to, especially seeing. I can't imagine this is the only card. Going back about 3 episodes ago,
Yeah.
I posited my suspicion that every one aspect card that even one that's simple, every one aspect card will eventually be eclipsed by a two aspect card. And
And again, I'm going to defend here the position that probably so, but not necessarily, because one of the beauties of game design technology is when you make a thing, you can make things both better and worse in a way that makes them better for some circumstances and worse for other circumstances. In
sure,
a sense that you get like niches for different cards.
And I agree with that, but I think the fact that
Yeah.
you can tack stuff onto it, right? Like Waylay is about as simple event as you can get, right? It does
Right.
one thing, it does one thing well, it's simple. Same with Open
Right.
Fire, right? And they're both mono aspected cards.
Yes.
But there's absolutely room where you could have a heroic Waylay that also, heals you for 2 while doing it, right? Like, some small triviality that isn't breaking, but then is better than Waylay. And
right, you can, but
and you still need that Waylay
is...
for the other cards, right? For the other decks that can't run that aspect. But anyways, as we get more cards, I think there's an increasing frequency where we're going to see mono aspected cards that do something simple, like Cell Block Guard, eclipsed by a dual aspected card that does something just ever so slightly more. And we're going to get into conversations.
Is that for decks that can run Phase 3 Dark Trooper, you would probably run Phase 3 Dark Trooper over Cell Block Guard. But if I'm running like a red-blue Grand Inquisitor deck,
not a choice.
Going to run, not a choice.
Well, and I, something that somebody pointed out in my LGS that I thought was really compelling, kind of a final note was applied, is that any deck that can currently run Cell Block Guard would probably just take 6 Cell Block Guards if it was a choice. It does great off of Unit Vader. It triggers, it's some kind of deck that's in some sort of ramp. Like Grand Inquisitor is generally not running Cell Block Guard. And if you're trying to ramp in Palpatine, absolutely, you'll take some more of that, some more Sentinel that slows the, gums the game up. So, funnily enough, even though one is better than the other, just you're actually axing something else completely. So, let's jump to another segment. Sorry about that. Bit of a technical hurdle, a bit of a mishap there. But we're going to jump into our second segment, niche keywords. Ned, when we talked to Ryan, you mentioned, you referred to grit as a niche keyword.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to jump in. We were in the middle of interviewing a dev. It was a little high stakes, but I wanted to follow up on that when it's just you and me and we can kind of grind things down into the dirt and kind of get you to, let's start by getting you to define what you meant by a niche keyword.
So I'm going to classify keywords into like 3 buckets. And these buckets, the contents of these buckets change over time for a given game. So initially you have like obvious keywords. So obvious keywords, I'm going to use an analogy that's going to make sense for precisely one person, and that's me. And that's in group theory, there's this idea where you can sort of map I'm doing a really bad job, but essentially group theory is you describe like operations and sets, and if you do an operation on an element of a set, you get another element of, or if you do an operation on an element of the group, then you get another element of the group. So obvious keywords are like you have like a very set bag of tricks, and then you just apply them to members of the group. So that's like the first kind of category.
Can you give me an example of this? In any, it doesn't
yes.
have to be,
so overwhelm, I
magic.
think. Yeah, overwhelm I think is like a really obvious keyword. So like Sentinel I think is a really obvious keyword where we have combat. We have combat. We want to make restrictions on combat. And so what are some restrictions that we can do on combat? Well, we can have a restriction on combat. The Sentinel is it restricts your target space, right? So it's a restriction of target space, right? And overwhelm is like an expansion of target space, right? Where we have combat, you have a powerful unit. There's this kind of like obvious mechanical and thematic like.
So you're going to take these assumptions of combat that, for example, or that maybe rules or strategy. So in the case of Sentinel, the rule is you can attack anybody you want, and you thwart that assumption. You thwart that rule.
Yes.
Or in the case of Overwhelm, normally you're looking to make reasonably efficient trades.
Right.
You don't normally want to throw your 9/9s into 1/1s.
Exactly.
But that's a strategy. There's no rule
that
you can't. But
what if we made it good? Right.
Overwhelm makes it actually strategically
Right.
very viable.
So that's
those are the obvious ones.
the sort of those are the obvious ones. The next ones we have are what I call like domain expansion. So the idea behind these are they take an area of the game that has previously been considered to be like not obvious and it or not mechanically explored, it makes it mechanically explored. So Smuggle, I think, is a really perfect example of like a domain expansion where resources are a thing and we have like previously interacted with resources in very limited ways with like Han's ability in the Millennium Falcon kind of and Lando.
Yep.
Yeah, but we're taking that and we're saying, okay, this is an area of space that we have not explored extensively, and now we're going to add that into like our standard bag of tricks. So similarly, I think that a lot of the recursion that's been happening so far, where the recursion of like Home One or what are the snow speeder, where you're getting cards back, it's not keyworded. And I understand why there's
rogue skirmisher, right?
You rogue squadron skirmisher. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
rogue skirmisher. In that case, though, then so you've got the obvious ones. You have which are just basic assumptions about the game. We're going to twist them. You have domain expansion, which is here's a corner of the game, and there's a whole bucket of things.
We're going to blow it out. Right.
So
and sometimes these things. So a magic example, I think. Is +1/+1 counters, right?
Well, I want to step back. That even within domain expansion, I mean, I don't want to reuse our word, but lowercase obvious, like those places. There are obvious domains where, like the resource row, the discard pile, right? Your deck. Right, these are
and some of these become obvious in retrospect. So, like for example, I think in Magic: The Gathering, scry and other like top deck manipulation keywords used to not be obvious, right? But then it became obvious when you started messing with it. +1/+1 counters, I think, is another example. You know, in Star Wars Experience, like every unit is exactly the same. It's the stats that are printed on it, but you know. We're going to add this new mechanical feature to enable us to disambiguate between units, and that is experience like tokens, essentially.
Well, and so I think there's something who said for the fact that like also a keyword might be a domain expansion keyword, but once that domain is expanded upon, now other keywords, not the original,
become obvious.
Other keywords become obvious. That, if we are allowed to play in this sandbox.
Yes.
Then the obvious.
Precisely.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, like for example, I think that a space that Star Wars has not gotten into that I expect them to get into at some point is the concept of token cards. Right. Like so many games have these tokens where they're pieces of cardboard that are put into play by other game effects that aren't like a full piece of cardboard and they don't have like complete.
So I'm going to take a lukewarm take. I'm going to make a lukewarm take. Right. So especially with the SHD, the Shadows of the Galaxy previews, where they were very explicit that here are the tokens for Shadows of the Galaxy, and they showed off two gorgeous pieces of art of Experience and Shield. The tone and phrasing and the fact that these are the tokens as opposed to these are the versions of the always existing tokens. Yeah. I think makes it very clear that future sets will have other tokens as options.
110%. Right.
And on top of that, if you do, I feel like if you're going to do a Clone Wars set, 1/1 battle droids is maybe the most obvious token. Token units. Yeah, okay, I love them. I love them.
Right. You know, they're great. They exist, but like that's ground that hasn't been broken yet. But once you break that ground, then you can start like adding more obvious keywords and interactions with those. Then the last sort of category is what I call niche keywords. And what I mean by a niche keywords aren't necessarily bad, but they are the space that they can take up is much smaller. Right, so like an obvious keyword tends to be able to go on lots of things and you can kind of riff on it a lot. And a domain expansion keyword, maybe it only exists in one set, but it opens up this space and then you can have other like obvious keywords that trigger off of that. Niche keywords, so like let's talk about grit, right? So things that make grit niche in my mind. It can't go on every unit. Like, fundamentally, there are some units that it doesn't make sense on. Any unit that has a relatively small hit points, it's just grit's a terrible key. Why would you put grit on that unit? It doesn't make any sense. And you can say, oh, it's a challenge for players, like figure out a way to do that.
Yep.
But I mean, and the payoff is dangerous. Something that Ryan talked about, and I think that is very true, is that grit really rewards you for stacking a lot of stuff onto a single unit, right? Like a bigger unit with the bigger your unit is, the more grit impacts it, and you can eventually get these huge, completely monster units. And within the context of the game, they seem to be very hesitant to have straight up kill a unit.
Right.
You got Vanquish, but everything else, Super Laser Blast. But even Takedown, which is a pretty kind of, it's the cheaper version of Vanquish, but it references hit points. And in general, they seem to be kind of, at least for the first set and what they've talked about so far, a little bit hesitant to have a lot of kill a person or kill a unit straight up, no nothing.
Right.
So
I'm going to push back because I love your buckets.
Right.
I like that mapping. Those three categories make perfect sense to me. I feel like once you expand into the implicit, once the rules expand just by virtue of the nature of the game into the domain of persistent damage,
yes,
then grit I think falls into an obvious category. Grit I think is actually one of those domain expansion, ergo obvious keywords, where the domain expansion happened in the actual creation of the rules. You don't see it in a lot of.
I feel like heal was kind of the obvious domain expansion there, where heal, we care about, once we have persistent damage, heal lets us interact with persistent damage, and
but
then
heal is just like something similar to lifesteal but capped, right?
Sure.
Or lifelink but capped.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, grit is, once we have if we're putting tokens on units to represent damage.
Yeah.
What if we did something with those tokens?
Okay.
That's a simple domain expansion question. And then, what's the most obvious thing you could do with tokens on a
power
card
them up,
representing
right?
damage?
Yeah.
What if they were what if they were power? Right? They obviously can't be hit points.
No.
Right, you can't put the token can't represent +1 and -1 at the same time. But what if it represented power? And so then it just in my mind becomes obvious. I acknowledge that you like a 1/1. I mean, I think the same can be said, to some extent is also true for Overwhelm, right? Like a 2/2 with Overwhelm. But how is a 2/2 for Overwhelm less of useless but challenge to the player card than a 2/2 with grit?
I think that the core reason why is grit, and this is just sort of my sort of native heuristic, is that power boosting effects are something that are kind of desirable, and square stat boosting effects are kind of desirable, but butt boosting effects are generally kind of bad. And so, grit, Overwhelm, I can see playing a deck where I'm playing some kind of crummy Overwhelm units and, Electro Stabs or, lightsabers or whatever. Imagine Guardian of the Wills, but with Overwhelm, right? You slap a lightsaber on that gentleman, and then you've got yourself a real unit. Whereas, okay, let's say that I'm going to make that 2/2 with grit. All right, well, I'm going to put something that boosts the size of its butt.
Resilient.
Hit point. Resilient, right? But then...
I think Resilient absolutely... it's not amazing, but in the right decks, I think it does see play. And I think due to the back and forth nature of the game. The fact that even without grit, Resilient just wrecks people's math, right? I've got a 5/5... You've got a 3/3 and a 2/2. You run your 2/2 or your 3/3 into mine, confident that I'll do something with it, and then you'll be able to hit me with the other thing. You run your 3/3 into my 5/5, and then I play Resilient.
Right, but there's
right?
one step that we've kind of left off about grit, and that is you can't turning it on yourself is more difficult, right? Like you need to have your opponent's units be able to bump into it. Right. Like you need to bump your unit into your opponent's units, or they need to bump their units into your units. And so, like grit on a small unit, I don't know. I'm sure that they will do it at some point, like to the extent that grit becomes evergreen. Um,
So
yeah,
yeah, that
yeah,
that goes. I guess I also have to assume that all of the, and maybe this is an errant assumption. I have to assume all of the Spark of Rebellion keywords are evergreen.
probably.
And dear listener, for those of you who don't play Magic, evergreen is a term used to mean keywords that will just always show up or are always available to the developers. Any given set has a finite number in traditional TCG design, a finite number of cards or of keywords that you can. You don't want to have 19 new keywords in one set, so you get a couple. Case in point, Shadows of the Galaxy has 2. It has Bounty and the associated capture mechanic, which is not a keyword, and it has Smuggle. Those are only the 2 new ones introduced in Shadows of the Galaxy. So I have to assume that all the Spark of Rebellion ones are carrying forward. I can't imagine that they're done exploring.
That's my guess. I imagine that probably at least, and again, they've designed 5 sets out, so probably I would.
Kyle Petchuk. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. The artist who illustrated today's preview. Yes, dear listener, we have jumped forward into the future. Who illustrated today's preview of This Is the Way.
Yeah.
Posted that he illustrated that card back in 2022, 2 years ago, and that he is currently working on illustrations for set 6.
Okay.
So they are currently pulling in art for set 6. So yeah, that's the level of advanced design. You think you question if all of the Spark of Rebellion cards are in set 5?
I think that probably all of them are, but I think that as like games roll forward, and I feel like given that they're designing so many sets out, and given how much I feel like the game has legs, their games have a way of needing to revise early keywords. So I think I'm going to point to 2. So I'm going to point to Hearthstone Charge. They got rid of, or they have heavily discounted Charge in favor of Rush just because it was a problematic keyword.
And for those who don't play Hearthstone, Charge was basically haste. You get to it, or ambush. You get to it. Not ambush.
Super ambush. Yeah. And Ender's Play Ready.
Ender's Play Ready. You get to it. You can attack with it the turn that it comes into play, and you can attack unit or base. And Rush, and I got out of Hearthstone, but I'm assuming Rush, if I recall through nerd osmosis, was essentially ambush. That
it's ambush.
You can attack the turn it comes into play, but only other units.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why they have ambush as a keyword, but they don't have like a haste equivalent. Like Ender's Play Ready is not keyworded. So like charge versus rush, and who's to say like what abilities are going to become problematic? But the other one from again the Dawn Ages of Magic is banding. Banding was the white keyword for quite a while. It has a bad reputation. It's really not so bad, but I appreciate that there's a lot of rules overhead. It led to a lot of dumb arguments, and
it's
so
2 keywords, Ned. Banding.
Well, and bands with others.
Bands with others.
Bands with others is an expansion keyword, right? Like banding was in the original set, and bands with others is a twist on it. But yeah,
bands with others was when I got into Magic. So I just didn't. It kind of, as much as I like healing, and I'm very excited that Vigilance is both the aspect of removal and of healing. I can never get into white in Magic because of banding. Like scarred me for life.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a rough keyword when you're trying to learn the whole game.
No, and I mean that's the cost of that keyword, and that's why they phased it out. And none of the keywords from Spark of Rebellion strike me as being particularly problematic. If they did,
right? You know what I mean? Like that's a hindsight question,
right? But I would say that of the keywords in Spark of Rebellion, the one that I would point to as most likely to be problematic in some future set is grit, essentially because if you have some kind of a way to make, like, essentially it allows for power bumping, and especially if you can find a way to keep units from dying, like we've kind of explored a little bit with Churret, right? Like, let's imagine that you give leader, turret, grit. There's a lot of self limiters on this, and there's not currently a lot of good self damage sources, yada yada yada. But I can imagine in some distant future set 12 universe where somebody discovers some completely ridiculous like grit interaction.
I mean, I don't think it has to be that ridiculous. I suspect that you tend to find the busted places that keywords are often found in TCGs is in their interaction with other keywords, right?
Yes.
For example, Magic has lifelink, which is, for those who don't play Magic, is restore, but where it's restore X, where X is the power of the unit. And I think that was a wise choice that FFG made, where they made the value of the heal independent of the power of the unit. But so lifelink is fine. It's not always super competitive in Magic, as I understand it. But where it gets, those weird infinite life combos come from also, combining with other abilities. Similarly, like, if grit's going to be busted, it's because we haven't seen an easy way to get grit and overwhelm on the same unit. I don't think that's possible right now. But the moment we start having upgrades that provide either grit or overwhelm,
then Chewbacca leader becomes completely ridiculous.
Yeah, right. Like if you can give Chewbacca leader overwhelm through some upgrade, that's going to be. I have to assume. I mean, like, right? If you want to talk about obvious, an upgrade that gives overwhelm, has to exist at some point.
Right. On a leader unit, right? Like, and being on a leader is really significant because the number of they generally seem really hesitant to let you straight up remove a leader. Like damage based removal.
So, I mean, not to get into spoilers or break it down, but like, so we've seen Moff Gideon has overwhelm. So now, like, I think that was the missing leader keyword. I think every other keyword is present. But I'm saying, like, Infiltrator, right? 1/1, Grand Saboteur. That's Devotion, right? Grants Restore 2.
Yeah.
Upgrade that grants keyword feels like
it's obvious.
That card is so obvious that it's inevitable, right? And at which point we're going to see a grit and an overwhelm keyword upgrade, and then once we do, then we get to kind of test the limits of the card. Okay, all right. Well, I think you and I might not be able to find agreement on. I accept your taxonomy of keyword obviousness. I don't know that. For me, grit feels
more obvious.
Like, pretty obvious once you're putting tokens representing damage on a card. That feels pretty obvious to me. But I accept that you do not.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I don't think that it's a huge reach for a keyword. I just feel like it is much more niche than all of the other keywords in Spark of the Rebellion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Granted. But that, I guess, leads me to my follow-up question. Ned, what is your name?
My name is Monday.
My name is Monday. I'm a mathematician.
I was recently tooling around and on Reddit, as one does, and credit to Reddit user whose name I forget, but they pointed out that since we're going to be talking about Shadows spoilers, there is a 3-card combo in Shadows of the Galaxy that
I want to put a timeout, Ned.
Yeah.
We do talk about spoilers. We just don't break them down. We don't review them. But I mean, our podcast existed before the game came out, which meant that everything we were talking about was, although not spoiler. There was a request from one of the devs on Discord to refer to these as previews because spoiler implies
previews. Yes, no.
But yeah, so we talk about. We just don't do the traditional. Here's our thoughts. But yes, so we're talking about previewed cards.
Right, and of the previewed cards, there was a note that if you combine DJ Death Star, the new Wanted card, and Resupply, you can potentially on turn 2 accelerate yourself to 5 resources, which you know.
Why don't you just because not
Sure.
everybody's on Reddit, walk through the combo.
So the essence of the combo is that one on turn. Let's see. So it would be on turn 2. On turn 1, you bounty. Or I guess you don't have to bounty. Whatever. On turn 2, you have 3 resources available. If your leader is Boba Fett, and you put into play the DJ Death Star with Energy Conversion Lab. They have ambush. They can attack your opponent's unit. If that unit has Wanted attached to it, Wanted
And has 2 health.
And has 2 health. Wanted has the text that it gives the unit that it's attached to bounty or ready 2 resources. So if you slam your gentleman into your DJ Death Star, your Death Star Super Laser Technician into their unit, you will defeat their unit and you will defeat your Death Star Super Laser Technician, assuming that their unit has at least 1 power. When your Death Star Super Laser Technician is defeated, it becomes a resource, and because you get to ready 2 resources from Wanted, plus 1 more resource from your Boba Fett leader ability, that takes you up to 4 resources, and then you can put into play a resupply, which will take you to 5 resources. And then once you have 5 resources, you can deploy Boba Fett. And then if we continue this train of thought into the complete depths of magical Christmasland, you then attack your Boba Fett into whatever unit your opponent played to conveniently set this interaction up. You defeat their unit, you ready yourself 2 more resources, and you will then have a total of 3 resources with which to deploy a perfectly reasonable 3-cost unit like Unit Boba Fett. In, again, the most magical
Christmasland. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Wow. That sounds. And you know what? That's going to happen once.
Yes. The
Right.
person is going to feel so good about.
So how magical Christmasland is that, Ned?
Well, so this is where we get into the details. So I had previously written a very simple calculator for combo odds, and that was a hypergeometric calculator. So to review hypergeometric distributions are a way of describing if I have so many of a particular type of card in my deck, and I draw so many cards, what are my odds of seeing at least so many copies, and I can specify it, of one of the cards in my deck. So I had previously written a quickie hypergeometric calculator for estimating my odds of being able to do the Palpatine change of heart shenanigans that were so near and dear to my heart. And the answer was...
So how many cards do you need to draw before you have
exactly
nearly assured odds of drawing change of heart as Palp?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And dear listener, to be clear, hypergeometric calculators have existed since GeoCities.
Yeah.
You can go just Google it and find out how many cards you need to draw to see one copy of 1, 2, 3, 4 cards in your deck. That is well-trod territory, I think. Right?
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
That is completely well-trod territory. The trouble with hypergeometric calculators is that hypergeometric calculators are assuming essentially independence, where if you're drawing cards, it's not making any claims on the contents of your hand, the existing contents of your hand.
It's how
so if
short gamble, like how many cards do you mulligan? What are the odds you're going to see a certain? How confident can you be that you're going to see a certain card by a certain point? But it's always a certain card.
Right, but if you need 2 certain cards, right, that math becomes a lot trickier because you need to see card A and card B. And the simplest way to do this, and it's pretty accurate, is essentially you do your hypergeometric for card A, you do your hypergeometric for card B, and then you AND the probabilities together. And when you AND probabilities together, you multiply them. But that's not exactly right? Because if you saw card A, by definition, one of the looks for card B had to yield card A. Right. So
you are.
So you're looking at fewer cards. Yeah.
You're guaranteeing that one of the cards that you're looking at for card B is a no
Right.
because it's card A.
Right.
Okay, I'm tracking.
So that and you can do it. You can do it with just pure hypergeometrics, but like that math
And
gets
to be
really
honest, for most people, being off by a half percentage point, a percentage point, is fine.
yes.
But we are not most
I'm,
people.
I'm not most people. And so like I care about this, and I also want to extend it because like for a 2-card combo it's not so bad, but if you're talking like a 4-card combo,
A magical
4-card
Christmasland combo.
Christmasland combo, then you're having to talk like there's significant amounts of the probability space that you would normally assume that are essentially foreclosed because they're incompossible, right?
Okay.
So
this combo
Yeah.
requires what? We need Boba Leader and ECL, but those aren't in the main deck,
Those are
so who cares?
Yeah.
Those are foregone. You obviously have
Right.
those. So you need Super Laser Technician.
Yep.
You need Wanted.
Yes.
You need
Resupply.
Resupply.
Yep.
And so those 3 are required. There's
Yes.
an unquantifiable variable that your opponent needs to have played a unit that's killable by DJ Death Star, so it's 1 or 2
Yep.
health. That can't, I assume, be. I mean, that's beyond math.
Yes.
And then so that's 3 cards, and to get to the truly magical Christmasland, you need to have the most busted 3-drop in the game Boba Fett unit.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Well, if we can't do that with hypergeometric calculators, Ned, how can we do that?
we can turn to our Monte Carlo machine. So for
God,
people who have
I love that, like, math has. I mean, Monte Carlo just sounds like a James Bond thing. It just sounds so
it's
awesome.
fun.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I made my bones writing Monte Carlo simulations for nuclear reactors, and so I have an inordinate fondness for the technique. It's a very powerful technique, and it kind of melds the worlds of math and games in a way that I find very satisfying. And so it's one of my go-to. It's the sonic screwdriver of my toolbox to cross universes briefly.
Yep. Fair. Okay.
So there is a small additional challenge, and the small additional challenge. So to talk about how a Monte Carlo technique works, essentially what you do is you simulate the situation a vast number of times, and by simulating the situation, you can come to a pretty reasonable estimate of the probability. So the classic example
New
of Monte
policy,
Carlo.
Ned.
Yes.
New policy. I'll let you keep explaining Monte Carlo, but we'll explain it once more in 2024,
Yep.
and then Monte Carlo will join our list of. We'll put it on the ForceUnlimited.com, and we'll assume you know what we're talking about. Like,
Yep.
because you've explained Monte Carlo once before, and it's not fair
Yes.
to expect dear listener to be current on every episode. But also, for the dear listeners who do keep up, it's not fair to ask them to listen to an explanation of Monte Carlo every time you do it, because I assume you're going to do it a lot because you made your bones doing it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so anyways, so you run the odds
So-
a bunch.
Right, and you do it a bunch, right? And so for the sake of the simulation, I generate a list. The list contains cards that I label, and the cards are either labeled cards that are part of a combo, or they are cards labeled miss. And you shuffle the list, and then you draw hands from the list, and then you draw.
So this comes right.
cards.
So is this the same? I mean, this is the same math then for our R&B episode where you're just running the odds.
It's different. Yeah, it's the same technique, right? Like that's the beauty of Monte Carlo is that the technique holds, and it's
If you
it's
just
a real
evaluate
yeah.
randomness over and over again, you
Yep.
eventually get pretty close enough for a human being to what the
Yep.
actual randomness is. Okay.
Exactly
good.
right. You're not analytically calculating the probability, but you are simulating the probability and assuming that you have a sufficiently large number of trials. And we can talk about what a sufficiently large number of trials is on a subsequent episode. But for a sufficiently large number of trials, in this case, I think I did 1 million trials. You get something that is a reasonable estimate of efficacy. But there is something that I have left out. And that thing that I have left out is another feature of hypergeometric math, and that is the mulligan. So the classic example of hypergeometric math in SWU is how many turn 1 units do I need, right? And we have answered this on a previous episode, but fundamentally, the way that one approaches this from either a Monte Carlo or an analytical technique is, let's talk about it from the analytical perspective. If you're using a hypergeometric calculator, the way that you handle this is if you consider that you are always going to mulligan for a turn 1 unit, where you define turn 1 unit however you want. Like, is Greedo a turn 1 unit? Sure, then throw them in the bucket, even though they're a 1 cost unit. Is R2 a turn 1 unit? Yeah, sure, throw them in the bucket. Is Sneak Attack a turn 1 unit? Maybe not. I don't know.
Or event, but
yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah, but yeah, you get to define that. That's a
Right. So if you are willing to always mulligan, essentially you draw 2 hands and you have to miss with both of them. So what you do is you take the probability of missing with one hand and the probability of missing with another hand, and you AND them together, and you get the odds of you not seeing a turn 1 play. And as a review for people, you need, if you are always willing to mulligan for a turn 1 play, you need 11 turn 1 plays in your deck to have a greater than 95% chance of seeing them. And that's assuming that you keep any hand with a turn 1 play, regardless of the contents of the rest of the hand, which I don't think is necessarily a valid
which is
thing.
actually absolutely inaccurate, because I've definitely drawn a hand with like the Scout Bike Pursuer, and then like 2 Vaders, an Avenger, Reinforcement Walker, and a Super Laser Blast, where you're like, got to toss that one back. Like, I could play something on round 1.
Right.
But then I'm dead.
Right.
So that math is
11 is the floor, assuming that you are always willing to mulligan. For specifically a turn 1 play, and you are keeping any hand that has a turn 1 play. And obviously, as the number of turn 1 plays increases, you can go forward. But when we're dealing with an N card combo situation, you have a question. Let's say that I have a 3-card combo, and I draw my starting hand, and I have 1 of my 3 combo pieces. Do I keep the hand or not? And that is an analytically that is a calculable, simulatable thing. If you want to maximize your chances of the combo, and you are willing to ignore everything else, for a 3 or a 4-card combo, the optimal odds are that you should keep any hand that has 2 or more of your combo pieces.
okay.
For a 2-card combo, you should keep any hand that has 1 or more of your combo pieces, if you want to maximize your odds of drawing into your combo, completely ignoring any other consideration.
By turn 2?
Period. If you want to maximize your odds, because the mulligan, right? It doesn't matter how far out you go, right? Like, you're starting off from a higher percentage of odds if you're always keeping according to this mulligan rule.
This is purely to answer the question: do I keep hand 1? Okay.
Yes. Do I keep hand 1? And the answer is: does it contain 1 or more of your combo cards for a 1-card combo, or 2 or more of your combo cards for a larger card combo? Then the answer is yes. And this is assuming 50-card decks.
What's a 1-card combo?
Sorry, a 2-card combo.
Okay, so 1 or more for a 2-card combo, and 2 or more for
anything.
Obviously,
higher.
if you're looking for a combo and you have the combo, you don't toss it.
Correct.
So 1 or more, and 2 or more for 3 for combos of 3 or more. Okay.
Yeah, a 1-card combo might conceivably be, I need this unit by turn N. Right? You can think of that as being a 1-card combo. I didn't do the math for that, but one could.
You either keep it or you don't, but that doesn't inform the toss mulligan question. Okay.
So if you are looking for a 3-card combo, so this is the Magical Christmasland, but not complete Magical Christmasland, your odds of doing it by turn 2, assuming that you follow the mulligan rule that I have specified, are 7.7%. 1 in 10. So, right?
Not like reliable, but that's not a totally freak occurrence. That's going to happen in a Swiss of 32 if enough people are trying that.
Yes. For a 4-card combo, your odds of seeing all 4 of the cards by turn 2, assuming that you follow an optimal mulligan strategy, is 1.69%, so about 1.5%.
That's
So-
entering real fluke territory.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to say that given the restrictions of the current card pool, I don't think that this is viable. But
Well, I mean, it's not. Well, let's
Yeah.
come back to that. But yeah,
Yes.
it's not viable.
if, and this is where we get into a little bit more space, if instead of looking for something that you're trying to do by turn 2, if instead you're looking to do something by turn 5. So I don't think that right now there are any like hyper Christmasland combos, but even a 4-card combo, you have about, again, following optimal mulligan rules, you have about a 16.5% of seeing a specific 4 cards by turn 5. Assuming that you are
And that's
hyper
what,
focused
1 in
on just
6?
those 4 cards. Yeah, something like
I mean,
that. Yeah.
that's every other match, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
every 2 to 3 matches. That's all. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. So I want to come back to that though,
Yeah.
and because I want to ask you, I don't want to get too into the weeds on Wanted because that's a preview, and we don't dive too deep on previews. But Green Boba running ECL is obviously running Boba unit, is obviously running Super Laser Technician,
Yep.
probably safely running Resupply.
Yep.
That one's maybe not quite as much a slam dunk, but still not a crazy pick. So you need this new card, Wanted, to make the combo work. But if Wanted proves to be viable outside the magical Christmasland,
Right.
and you and I have talked off air about, does Boba, who can already ready 1 to 2 units,
1 or 2
Leader
resources,
Boba.
rather. Yeah. Yeah.
1 or 2 resources by virtue
Yeah.
of being Boba, care
Yeah.
about readying even more resources with Wanted? And that's an excellent question that we can leave to better people. But if that is a non-crazy pick to put in a Boba deck, that does, a 7% chance, right? 1 in 12, 1 in 15. If you like all of those cards,
Yeah.
then Magical Christmasland is going to happen.
Pretty often, yeah.
The argument against Magical Christmasland, I think, is that if you're putting in cards that are only good during Christmas, right?
Right.
But I feel like this combo is like ham. Like, yes, it's great at Christmas, but it's actually pretty reliably good all the time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, I need a ham sandwich right now.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got our odds. They'll be in your GitHub. We can throw up just a little PNG of the chart or they'll be here. They're obviously here for our
The
visual
chart
listeners.
the chart is for 2 cost units because there's not like a good way to show, like, I can make a chart, but I don't think it's going to be that informative. I can make a data table and put it in, or like a CSV.
No, that's
or
fine.
something.
No, I see what you're saying. No. I think that's
Yeah.
the material. But the general idea is, don't put magical. Your odds of getting the combo drop pretty fast. Even
3
with your
card
optimal.
combos get 3 to 4 cards. 3 card combos are not real likely. Again, if you're looking by turn 5 and you're looking for specific 3 cards, you have, and assuming this was caveated on, you have 3 copies of each of the relevant cards. In
Yeah,
your 50
obviously,
card
if you're
deck.
looking
Yeah.
for the combo, you want to have a maximum
Right.
amount. Okay.
But with a particular 3 card combo, you're at 30% by turn 5. So if there are sufficiently strong 3 card combos,
I mean,
that
if
would
each
appear
of those
around
cards
turn
is good by
5.
itself,
right?
a 1 in 3 chance of Voltron is a good odds.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad.
Okay. I mean, heck, in a best 2 out of 3, you're likely to pull it off every match, right? Assuming your match goes to 3 games, which mine always seem to. I can't close it out. So, Monday, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so, other than there is one more caveat that I'm going to put on here, and that is card selection. Right now, there's not a lot of tools for additional card draw and card selection that see play. Now, sorry, that's not true. For a cause I can believe in does see a lot of play, and Inferno 4 sees a lot of play. And those are card selection effects. I did not simulate with card selection effects, but card selection effects are effectively like moving you giving you more draws. So a thing that is going to make these combos, like multi-card combos, viable is when you get a lot of kind of free or cheap card draw and card selection. The more of that you can throw into your deck,
Right.
the more
filtering,
you're getting more
the more
looks.
drawing.
Yeah.
The easier it is to assemble combos. And I think
Right.
that, I mean, that's leaving Mathland and into, I think, general TCG theory, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
but that feels known. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it, so I assume most good players know it. The more cards you can look at, the better you'll do.
The better your odds are. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all she wrote. This was episode 13, Unlucky 13 of The Force Unlimited. We're recording the weekish of April 15th. Dear listener, if you have any thoughts about the episode, please email us at theforceunlimited@gmail.com. Ned, do you have any final thoughts?
I do, and that is, please look at my GitHub. Like, I'm maintaining it. Apparently nobody looks at it, but it's there. It's real. It's spectacular.
If you,
Yeah.
it's like taxes, Ned. If you don't maintain it, people will look at it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
If you keep it nice and tidy, nobody will. Which is, I realize, as I say that out loud, incentivizing you not to keep it tidy, but keep it tidy. And with that, dear listener, we will see you in 2 weeks.